So the last couple things in chapter 4, still on tissues, just kind of walks through our membranes. Hey, Elena?
Yes.
Do you have a question or are you okay?
No, I'm okay.
I'm going to ask you to mute. And the only reason I'm doing that is because if you're not on mute, when people come back and try to watch the recording, they'll just see your pretty picture on the screen, which you may not want. All right. So the last couple of slides that we're going to walk through are just on membranes. So in terms of the membranes are things that we might find inside or outside of the body. And a membrane has more than one type of tissue. So they're actually considered organs. In order for it to be an organ, it has to have at least 2 tissues. And so there's 3 kinds of membranes that we're going to walk through. One is the cutaneous membrane. Does that sound familiar to anybody? The term cutaneous? What's it mean?
Skin.
Yes, ma'am. It just means your skin. So your skin is considered a membrane. It is an organ. We also have mucous membranes, right? Mucous membranes are moist membranes. And a lot of times these are membranes that we'll find sort of in the openings of our body. So like your mouth is a mucous membrane. The nasal cavity has a mucous membrane. The urogenital tract has that mucous membrane. It's openings to the inside. And then lastly are serous membranes, which we have already talked about those in chapter 1. These are membranes that we find in our closed body cavities. So we'll start with our cutaneous membrane, right? This is, Andrea said this is our skin. And there are 2 tissues that are in your cutaneous membrane, right? A membrane has to have 2 different tissues. The one on the surface, again, think of your skin, a covering or a lining. So we know it's epithelial tissue. The type of epithelial tissue, remember we have different kinds, simple or stratified. Think of the functions. Simple epithelium is always involved in absorption, secretion, and filtration. Stratified epithelium is there for protection. It's nice and thick. So the first layer of your skin, your cutaneous membrane, is a stratified squamous epithelial tissue. It's nice and thick. It's there for protection. Just under that, you have a dense, irregular connective tissue. Again, let's think about this one. This is the one where you have a lot of collagen fibers arranged irregularly. So it can withstand tension in lots of different, there we go. From different directions. Okay, so a dense irregular connective tissue right underneath that stratified squamous epithelium means that now your skin can withstand a lot of tension from different directions. Again, remember, we put too much tension on it and that second layer can tear. We see it as stretch marks. We're going to talk way more about the skin in chapter 5. So we'll talk more about things like stretch marks and burns and things that can affect your skin. Another kind of membrane are our mucous membranes. Another term for that are mucosa. Now here's another example of where if it ends in A, to make it plural, we add the E on the end. Right? That makes it plural. And your mucous membranes are going to line your cavities that are open to the outside. So again, I mentioned the digestive, the respiratory cavity, the urogenital tracts. These are moist membranes, so they're usually wet. And the 2 tissues that we find are stratified epithelium, right? Again, think about the lining of your mouth, right? I think I told you all on Monday that my child is really into some Captain Crunch right now, which to me, that stuff will tear your mouth up. So this is there for protection. Protection from abrasion, protection from wear and tear. So in the mouth, in the nose, in the urogenital tract, you want a nice thick tissue. And then just under that is a loose connective tissue. A lot of times the type of loose connective tissue is areolar connective tissue. I'm going to flip back. Close your eyes. I don't want to give anybody a seizure. I'm moving real fast. I'm going to flip back just to an image of areolar so you can see it. This is a lot of times in the second layer of our mucous membranes. And the reason is, remember, this is a loose connective tissue. It's very spread out, has a lot of collagen fibers, has elastic fibers, can retain a lot of fluid. But the kind of cell that we find in here a lot of times is not just our fibroblasts, because that's our connective tissue proper cell, but also white blood cells, macrophages, mast cells. So a big function of this tissue is immunity. So this tissue, because it's a loose tissue, you've got white blood cells. Remember, their job is to fight infection. Because this is really spread out, white blood cells can literally move through this tissue. They can patrol the area and they can look for any kind of foreign organism that may have gotten in. Now think about that and how important that is when we're talking about an opening into our body, right? Our mouth, our nose, our urogenital tract. We want the first tissue to be nice and thick for protection. And then just underneath that, we want areolar connective tissue because we want our immune system cells right there, just in case we get a tear or we get a foreign organism that has made its way through that top tissue. All right, so the last kind of membrane are our serous membranes. And remember, we can call these serosa. Again, here's that E example. Okay, again, making it plural. And these are going to be membranes that are in our closed body cavities. So y'all did these in lab last week for your chapter 1 lab, where you looked at things like the ventral body cavities and the dorsal body cavities, and the serous membranes around those. And there are 2 tissues in your serous membranes. The outermost tissue is a simple epithelium. Notice every one of these has been epithelial tissue because it is a covering or a lining. So we have a simple epithelium here. It's not stratified. And the reason is that your serous membranes need a simple epithelium so that you can reduce friction. You don't want a lot of friction around your organs that are moving and within those tight body cavities. So a simple epithelium is absorption, secretion, filtration, but also because it's so thin, it really is a very slick lining. So it's great at reducing friction. And then there's also a loose connective tissue under that. And again, it's typically something like areolar. Right, it has those white blood cells in it. Now there's 2 types. So remember, we have our parietal serosa or our visceral serosa. Parietal means that it lines the cavity. The term visceral actually just means organ. So visceral serosa are the ones that sit on top of the organs. And then we give them a name associated with the organ or cavity that it's part of. So we have a parietal and visceral pleura around the lungs, parietal and visceral pericardium around the heart, and parietal and visceral peritoneum in the abdominopelvic cavity. Okay, so this is a great picture showing you each of those. All right, so that is it for our chapter 4. All of our tissues, we talked a little bit about membranes. I know this outline says tissue repair. I've moved that into chapter 5, where we do skin. We'll talk about what happens if you cut your skin and how your skin can go about repairing itself. It's the same process, okay? So we don't do tissue repair in chapter 4. We're gonna save it for the next chapter. Your chapter 4 lab PDF, now that we've gone through chapter 4, I would say now you can go on, and as long as you're familiar with your tissue types, now you can probably go in and do that lab PDF. You might be a little more confident doing that now.